what you focus on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lady K Chat podcast. You are here with your favorite host, Lady K. And for those who are tuning in for the first time, I want to say welcome. I want to let you know that I speak the truth. I don't hold my tongue back, but I do it with love. And I'm just so grateful that you are here tuning in with me today. And the whole month of March, we are talking about conflict resolutions, in relationships. And we're also speaking about the gender wars that's going on. But the main thing that people need to understand is that sometimes our behaviors is a little bit deeper than that. It roots back to childhood. I'm sure some of us know, but before we dig in and I get there, I want everyone to give a warm welcome to my first time guest here today, Mr. Steve Berlack. How are you, Steve?
I am well, Lady K. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Steve. Thank you.
Yes. This is going to be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. Like I said before, Steve, of course, the overall idea is, is the conflict resolution part. But sometimes, we got to get to the roots before we
to
say,
it.
hey, let's resolve
You about to dig into some stuff. I'm going to tell you that right now. We're going to dig into some stuff.
And I was saying something to Steve earlier. Steve was like, no. I said, but I'm going to bring it to the table anyway, because I want to see who
Go
can
ahead.
resist.
Bring it to the table.
I was saying something to the extent that some men, when they get to a certain part of their life, they might say, I don't want to be like my dad. But then they don't realize unconsciously, they are exemplifying behaviors that's just like their dad. And Steve, you had something else different to say. What was your response?
Actually, what I would say is more of a tangent of it. Clearly, there are men out there who had negative role models from their fathers.
Right.
I don't think anybody would argue that that's not true. I think what I would push back on is the degree to which that's normal or that's common, even in our community. Because there are plenty of men out there in our community and elsewise who had very good father figures in their lives and had very positive role models, including their fathers. And so what I would say is that children reflect the behaviors of their parents, whether that's good and or bad. As a matter of fact, it's usually a mixture of both. It goes down to something really simple. Nobody is purely evil. Nobody is purely good. Everybody's a mixture of both, including parents. As a matter of fact, one of the hardest lessons I had to learn about my mother, my father, first of all, was killed in Vietnam when I was 7 months old. So I never got to know my father. I grew up with my mother and my grandparents. But it took me until my adulthood to realize that my mother was Dolores Berlack, a human being, and not just my mom. And all of the negative behaviors that she had as a human being, I had to actually give her the space to do that because I had to realize she's just as human as I am, and she has every right to have warts and flaws. And so I think it's a matter of perspective. I think it's a matter of how we view our parents. I think it's a matter of giving our parents, including our fathers, space to be real human beings with real flaws and real strengths, and recognizing that, putting it in perspective, incorporating what you can in a positive way to inform you who you are as a person, and then moving forward and conquering your challenges that way.
Absolutely. I thank you for that perspective, Steve, because I do have to say this, right? I think sometimes when we get to a certain place at an adulthood and we do reflect back on some of the things about childhood and once you're in that mature space, you can say, you know what? My mom probably didn't even know what she was realizing she was doing back then, but I'm at the space now because maybe you're a parent, or maybe because you're more mature, or maybe now because you get it, you be like, you know what, like you said, they were human. They didn't realize what they did, because there is some stuff that my mom said to me, and I'm like, whoa, did she realize what she said to me?
Yes.
But I forgave her, and I was also like that too. I remember, I love my mom. I love her dearly, but I understand that she worked a lot. She was the backbone of the family. Even though she had a significant other, but my mom still worked. And when I take a look back, and I was to say that she used to miss some of my events, and I was mad at her that she couldn't make it. But now, as an adult and as a mom, I see that she couldn't make it because she had to make a decision. Do I feed my family,
Yes.
or do you want to go
Yes.
electric? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Those are the untold stuff that we didn't know growing up, because at the same time, that was none of our responsibility. That wasn't our part, that the
Yes.
parents had to make that decisions. But at
Yes.
the same time, too, I think growing up now, now parents are trying to say, you know what? I want more time for my kids. I want that because, I didn't get that growing up. So now, it's changing a lot of narrative in the
Yeah.
household because of the things we've seen growing up.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you just from my personal experience, like I can't speak to, the general public or whatever, but I can speak to me. And what I can tell you is this, like I said, my father was killed, so I didn't know him. However, I grew up with my grandfather, my maternal grandfather. And so all of the positive things I got about being a man, like the things that he taught me, the first thing he taught me more than anything else is what it meant to be a Berlack.
Mm.
I hope everybody heard that. He taught me what it meant to be a Berlack. And it's funny because these are conversations that you just don't hear a lot of, you don't always hear about parents having, but parents are having these conversations all over the country.
Right.
But it doesn't get in the news. It doesn't get talked about, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to talk about it today because it was, and I'll tell you the story. And it's so funny because I talk about this in my coaching. So I actually was a kid in the South Bronx growing up. I had a bunch of friends around me who were like, yo, Steve, we're going to go to the store, man. We're going to get some food. We're hungry. Let's take some. They wanted to steal from the store. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to, it wasn't in me. I didn't really want to do it, but I did something I almost never did. And I fell for that peer pressure. And I went in and I tried to steal like a bag of chips or something silly. And I had like a trench coat on. I put it in my coat. Now, mind you, I'd lived there for like 2 years. The store owner knew me. He knew my mom. Like he knew my family. He's like, he's looking at my face. I had to have this look on my face like I'm doing something wrong. He
Right.
stops me. He opens my coat. Sure enough, I got like chips or whatever in my coat. So the first thing he does is he tells my mom. Now, I don't know about other people's moms, but my mom was from the old school. My mom was from I'm going to whip that behind 2-3 times first. Then I might ask you a question or two about what happened. And that's exactly what happened. But here's the funny thing. I don't remember that. I don't remember the whipping she gave me. I just know she did because I know who she was. What she also did was, like a lot of people's mothers out here, she told everybody in the family what I did, right? She was on the phone all day the next day. So the next weekend, I go over to my grandparents' house. I'm with my grandfather. And if you knew my grandfather, you'd know how significant this was. As soon as I walked in the door, he looked at me and he said, come here, son. And I'm like, oh my God. Because my grandfather was the goofy type. He was like the one that he used to ball up toilet paper and wet it up and like throw it at me. Like he was a kid at heart, right? Which is why I think he and I connected so well. And he just looked at me and said, come with me. He sat me down. I remember this like it was yesterday. He sat me down on the bed in the bedroom and he said, it starts with this, son. And he picked up a pencil and he held it in front of me and he put it on the table. He said, the next thing you know, it'll be this. And he picked up a box of tissues and he put it next to the pencil. He said, the next thing you know, it'll be this. And he picked up the table lamp and he put it next to the box of tissues. And he looked at the three and I got the message, right? It starts small and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Like that was the point he was making, right? And I'm looking at him and he looks at me and I'll never forget the next thing he said. He looked me dead in the eye and he said, Berlacks don't do that. Plain, simple, never raised his voice. He said, Berlacks don't do that. He then proceeded to tell me the story of what it was like for him as a Black kid growing up in Harlem in the 1920s. And not being able to cross certain streets because the Italians lived here, the Jewish folks lived here, knowing that he could get hurt or killed crossing certain streets, right? Becoming a private detective in New York under those circumstances. He talked to me about his son, my uncle, being a court officer, right? For decades at that point. And he told me that Berlacks have always been on the right side of the law. And he said, know who you are. And he turned on his heel and walked out. And he never spoke of it again. And those are the stories that I think we need to tell more of about how Black men are raising their children. We don't tell these stories. That impacted me the rest of my days. And so when I hear people say that, there are guys out there who don't want to be like their dads, they don't want to, yeah, certainly. But for every story you tell, I can tell you a story about grandpa. And I could
Absolutely.
tell you about other men out there who've had those kind of role models. And for me, it wasn't even my father, but there was a very specific circumstance to that. I would also suggest that if there are men out there who grow up saying that, you know, I don't want to be like my father, I would suggest to them that they take off the lens of being the son or the daughter and put
Mm-hmm.
on the lens of I am a human being looking at another human being. Look
Mm.
at them from that lens and
Mm.
then look at their life. Look at how they did what they did. I'll tell you another story. Now, my mother remarried, married my stepfather. My stepfather was one of the most abusive people I've ever seen in my life. He's the one person in life I ever actually out loud said that I hated.
Mm.
Matter of fact, I won't go into the gory details. What I will say is that I had nightmares about him beating my mother and I until I was an adult, right?
Wow.
Now, my mother, when she remarried, had my sister. And just recently, let me backtrack for a second. Let me tell you why I stopped having those nightmares. I realized that this was a problem because I'm waking up in the middle of the night as a grown behind man, dreaming about this guy.
Wow.
Until one day, I said, you know what? I got to stop this. And he was still alive at the time. And I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to reach him. And so I said, you know what? I can't keep going on like this. I've got to, one, let him know what he did to me. And then two, I need to let it go. I need to forgive him. Sure enough, about a week later, I had a dream that I'm sitting at a bar and he's sitting with me and we're having drinks, both as grown men. And I
Wow.
was back there and I told him the impact that he had on me, how I was having dreams about him, how it impacted my relationships with men generally, and how it made me afraid as a person to speak up or to be myself, and how I became shy because of it, and how hurt I was by watching him beat on my mother, and there was nothing that I could do as a kid, and how helpless I felt as a boy growing
Wow.
up. I told him about all that impact. And then I looked at him and I said to you, but you know what? With all of that, I'm okay. I'm doing all right. And I said, you know what? I forgive you. It's okay. And I never dreamt about him again.
Wow.
Never again. And then now going back to my sister, she's an adult now, right? So we had this conversation about him. And she started telling me the story of who he was as a child growing up in South Carolina. We're talking in the 40s and 50s, growing up in South
Mm.
Carolina as a Black kid, right? Where he saw it wasn't a glass ceiling, it was a brick ceiling over his head as a Black kid in South Carolina in the 50s.
Right.
And the things he had to do, he had to go out there and he had to hustle. He had to learn how to play the game and get out there and do stuff that, maybe he wouldn't have done under different circumstances. Malcolm X used to talk about that all the time, about
Right.
how people who were out in the street slinging drugs could have been mathematicians. They could have been Fortune 500 CEOs, but it was the circumstances that led them to be the men that they were. And she started painting this different picture of him.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I started to see him as Fred and not as this stepfather who abused me and abused my mom. I started understanding some of the reasons why he responded to my mother and to other people the way that he did. And I'll tell you something, my mom wasn't the flower in this either.
Right.
And for these ladies out here, let me tell you, I will tell you this, before you get up in some man's face and start talking all that trash and putting your finger in his face and getting all up in his face, thinking he ain't gonna do nothing, you might want to think again.
And you know what? I'm happy you say that, Steve, because sometimes in the moment, people snap,
Heck
you know,
yeah. Heck
and
yeah.
they come bold. And I'm happy you said it because I had an experience like that, but I never got hit, but I just had a moment because the person made me so angry. And this is me
Mm-hmm.
arguing with an ex of mine, and I got in his face. And I think maybe a few hours later or the next day, I actually sat back and I said, Kalima, you lucky he ain't hit you. I said, because I had to remind myself, I said, that's a man, and that's the strength of a man. Not to say it will make it right if he did, but at the
Right.
same time, too, like you said, I played
Right.
my part, but I had to remind myself, that's a man, and you need to control your temper. That's all I have to say. So yes, you are
Exactly.
absolutely right, Steve. So I say that to ladies. There are a lot of women out there, and I think it's because of what society teaches, but we think it's okay for us to get in men's faces and to yell at them.
Right.
And then while we're yelling at them, speak demeaning language, and for them to sit there and accept that. Like, that's crazy if you really think, but that just shows you that's the toxic side of you. Because that
Exactly.
was the toxic side of me.
Exactly.
And you said something earlier, profound, Steve, earlier, when you said when your grandfather was speaking to you, and you said, and then he didn't even have to raise his voice at
Never.
you. And I got raised completely different. I was raised around yellers. I
Hmm.
was raised around people who cuss. So that was my environment. So you have to understand, this is what I'm used to. I'm
Yes.
used to this environment. So going back to the gentleman where I said I got into his face when I first met him, he's always saying, "You're too beautiful to be talking like that." And I'm like,
Mm.
what is he talking about?
Mm.
Constant. You are too beautiful to talk like. I'm like, yo, I don't know what he's talking about, but I don't get it. But it took me time to realize that you are a young lady and your language is disgusting. And this man sees you as beautiful, but your language is disgusting. He cannot
Mm.
get with you. He cannot click with you because you don't see who you are. And that was one of
Right.
my biggest realities.
Woo.
Realize how I was bringing certain mentality and certain behaviors in my relationship because of how I grew up, because that was my norm.
Yes. And that's the point. Kalima, you said a mouthful there, okay? Because first of all of us do that. Men and women. There's no one that doesn't do that. I'm including myself in that. I'm a product of what I saw growing up.
Right.
That's why I always coach people. There's two questions you have to answer before you start addressing challenges of your life. Because the problem is people are trying to live this life and they're trying to overcome these mountains and, and become kings and queens. And they're trying to, I have bad relationships. Why do the same people keep coming in my life? And I can't understand why I keep attracting the same energy over and over and over again. I can't stand these men. I can't stand these women. Why am I always doing it? Or why am I getting this job? I always have jobs that I don't like. And I don't like this job and I want to do this, but I don't know how I'm going to do that. And people keep trying to address those issues. But I'm telling folks, that is not the challenge of life. The challenge of life is to answer two really simple, fundamental questions. First and foremost, and you already asked it, Kay, who are you? Ready for question two? Because a lot of folks ain't ready for question two. To whom do you belong?
Ooh, come on now.
And we're addressing these challenges like why do I have these parents that I don't like, or why don't I want to be like my father? When the real question is, who are you and to whom do you belong? Because the reality is what your father is showing you, rightly or wrongly, what your mother is showing you, rightly or wrongly, they're showing you who you are. They're showing you what's inside you. So then once you start becoming aware of it, you can then take control of it. And here's the other thing. When you start becoming aware of who you are, the really funny thing about it, Lady K, is that the people around you start reflecting it. I hope everybody heard that.
Ooh, take us to church.
I really hope folks heard that.
That was a church moment right there. Yes.
People around you start reflecting who you are, the more aware of who you are you become.
Right.
So instead of asking these questions, why do I keep attracting all these people? What you might want to look at first is your daggone self.
Absolutely.
Because the answer lies within you.
Absolutely.
The only thing you can't change is family.
Yeah.
Now, that's a whole nother part, right?
Yeah,
you can't change your family. But what I would say to anybody, especially to men, what I would say to men out there who say, and I heard you, Lady K, when you said, there's men that I know who are like, I don't want to be like my father. Again, I would say to them, take what they experienced with their father as instruction on what's inside them. Look at it honestly. Learn the story, because at the end of the day, it's about the story. What is the story of your father? Who was his father? Who was his grandfather? What were they going through? Because let me tell you something, as a Black man in America, when you can be lynched at any given day, when my grandfather, who was in World War II, could be lynched just for wearing his uniform at home in the state, that's real, folks. We got to know these stories.
Right.
How does that impact a man? How does that make him address his woman when he's facing that kind of pressure? And let me tell you, what if his woman isn't giving him peace at home?
Absolutely.
Ladies. So, you've got to put all of this in its proper perspective. In fact, a lot of people don't know that I write poetry, right? Outside of the things that I do. And so there's a poem I wrote called Reflux, which talks about that. And the story of it is that I saw this painting years ago, and the painting was of this, looked like a wife. Her top was torn, her breasts were exposed, she had one arm covering her breasts, and she's angry, and she's screaming at what looks to be her husband, right? But she's pointing to the background of the painting, and in the background is this white man, obviously the slave master, because they're wearing like slave clothes.
Right.
Pointing. Now, the white guy in the background is grinning. He's literally just standing there grinning. The man, the husband, is this big muscle-bound dude, right? Shirt off. But guess what? His shoulders are slumped. His head is down. He's looking down because guess what? He realizes there's not a dang gone thing he can do. There's nothing he can do. He cannot protect his wife in this circumstance. And I ask everybody listening, what does that do to the relationship between that man and that woman? What kind of damage is done emotionally, spiritually, to that man and that woman when he cannot do the fundamental thing that he's there to do as her man, protect her?
Wow.
When he has to give up his life, his future, and still not impact any change, what choice is that? What does it do to that man, to his ego, to his manhood, when he has to deal with that? And here's what the point of the poem is. How does that then all of that spiritual and emotional damage get passed down to their children and to their children's children and their children's children's children? And we are the children's children of that man and woman, all of us.
Absolutely.
And we're looking at each other and we're screaming at each other and we're fussing with each other and we're arguing. We're sitting here having these conversations like, I don't need you and I don't need you. We're sitting here having these false conversations and arguments when we don't even know the story.
Right.
So I say, wake up, people. All those folks who sit there talking about, well, I don't want to be like my dad. Wake up. Find out the story first. Know who you are. Figure out what kind of pain and suffering we've been dealing with. Look at it honestly. Have conversations. The first thing I did was I talked to my grandparents. So I would suggest that to everybody. Talk to the elders that you know.
Right.
Learn from them, because they will give you perspective that will help you process things like, I don't want to be like my dad. And when you process it properly with the full story in mind, it's amazing how much you'll grow, because you'll become self-aware. You'll know who you are. Absolutely. And Lord help us, prayerfully, you will also discover to whom you belong, which is a whole nother conversation. We could spend another 2 hours talking on that.
We sure never can, but I love how you grab all of that and you bring it home, because there you go.
Yes.
That's the root right there.
Yes.
That's the root. That's going to help you with your identity, you know? And I think sometimes we think we have to have everything all together. No, you just got to have the basis, because guess what? Let me tell you something. Every season of your life looks different, and you have to know what season in your life that you're in. And you know,
Yes.
just me, just speaking as an example, I'm definitely in that season of awareness. Like I'm in awareness of some of my habits that I had, you
Mhm.
know, what I brought to the table and how I want to change things and how I want to do different things with my children. And I'm like, this is a space where I'm at because, like you said, Steve, I had understanding. I really did. Like you know, my grandmother passed away 2 years ago, and my dad just passed away in December. And you know, and I'm just taking this all soaking in, and I'm just reflecting back, you know, on their childhood, some of the stuff that I got to learn about them. So it helps me learn a little bit more about them, and then where I'm at right here, you
Mhm.
know. So
Mhm.
I respect and I love this place that I'm at because I always say, you know, I'm young and I know there's people older than me, and they're still like still stuck in that mindset. It's like you got to come out because right now I think it's a choice. You know, with everything that's around, with technology so advanced, with resources,
Mm.
everything that you do now is a choice. I understand back then they didn't have that, but right now it is a choice. So if you're choosing to remain stuck, that's a part of
Yes.
it because there's no reason why with the internet and what people
Yes.
bring, and like I said, the resources now, you have to want to do better. You have to want to be
Yes.
better. Like you said, when your grandfather told you like you're a Berlack, what does that mean? So you gotta ask yourself, whatever your name is and whatever name you're carrying, what do you want to how you want your children to carry that? And how you want
Yes.
your children to carry that? Because it's all about the name.
Yes. And we don't talk enough about that. And I will add this. There is nothing more humbling in life than having kids. It is humbling to have children and to become a parent. And I'll tell you why, what I've discovered. What makes children so wonderful and fantastic isn't just that they give you the opportunity to live life again, which they do, right? You
Right.
literally can live again through your children. But what's even more glorious about kids is that they are closer to our original source than we are as adults. I hope everybody heard that too.
Yes, I heard that.
Children are closer to our original source than we are as adults. And that original source that they're closer to is love. They
Absolutely.
come from love, literally come from love, right? And and I'm not talking about the circumstances of their parents. I'm talking about the source of love. They come from that, right? And so they're closer, they remember it, right? It's there within them. It's life that actually puts dirt on it. That's a whole nother conversation. And so what happens is children are naturally forgiving. They have this ability to forgive and to see you for who you are better than adults do. It's when they become adults that stuff really can get flipped around and changed. And it's other adults who can start whispering in their ear, your father ain't.
Yeah.
That's when stuff starts happening. But on their own, they see people. That's why you see Black kids, white kids, Asian kids, Latino kids. That's why you see them all getting along in 2023. That's why you see them like they will play together on the playground. Meanwhile, adults are clutching their pearls because they can't understand. You know, it'll be a kid who might, might be different somehow, and yet they just don't care. They don't look at people that way. We do as adults.
Right.
We're the ones that do that.
Do condition and train and you know, and like
Yes,
you said, life.
yes. And so I will say, I will be the first one to say, I wish I could tell you, Kay, that I was the perfect father, that I did everything perfectly correct and I did everything. No, I'm a human being. I made mistakes as a father, but but the love of the child is still great. They still love me, right? That's the thing that's absolutely amazing about children. Then the question becomes, can I, as the father, actually communicate to them who I am, what I'm about, why I made the mistakes I did? Come at them as a human being, even
Right.
though I'm their father, right? It's not about my authority over them. It's about the fact that I'm a human being connecting to another human being, and let them see me as a human being, just as I needed to do with my mother, right? She and I never had that conversation. I had to learn it the hard way as an adult, but I'm conscious to teach them about that, to talk to them and say, listen, I'm a human being. I'm going to make mistakes, right? If I make a mistake, talk to me. If I can correct it, I will. If it's not about me correcting it and I did it because I have a certain view of the world being an adult, I'm going to tell you that. No, listen, I see things differently as an adult. This is why I did what I did. Right.
Right.
And you may not understand it now, but I'm telling you, as you get older and you get some more experience like I had, you'll understand why I did what I did. It's not always about giving in to your kids. It's about talking to them, communicating with them, letting them know how you make your decisions.
Ooh, that part is so interesting that you say that. One of the things, once I became into a state of awareness, I said to myself, I said, if I felt like I did something to my children that was wrong, I said I was going to apologize. So
Yes.
I got into the habit of apologize. I know there's a lot of parents, they don't apologize and they don't understand. That's gonna do something to your kids when you don't. But
Yes.
I ain't gonna go there. I'm gonna talk about what I did with my son. So I apologized to him one day. So my children might hear me apologizing to them, from something, because you think after you're like, oh shoot, I didn't really mean that. And sometimes you mean well, but you're like, oh no, that's not what I meant. And then sometimes you give them explanation so
Yeah.
they can have understanding. So the other day, my youngest, he did something very to the T to upset me. So when he did that, I didn't want to be bothered with him, and I had to let him know. Right now, mommy need her space, so I'm gonna go over here real quick, and you can stay over here. But I just need space because you know why? I said because mommy's a human being. Then I had my oldest son come and speak to him. I said you need to let him know that your mom is a human being because right now you see me as mom, the person who wear these many hats. You're not
Yes.
seeing as that human being. So I had to tell him, like, mommy have feelings. So when I did sit with him, he said, I apologize, mommy. I said, your apology is accepted. And I left it just like that. Don't tell people it's okay because then he might think it's okay.
Yes.
If I tell him that, he might grow up thinking that, and then he might go into expecting that from his woman. You see how that
Exactly.
plays and how
Yes.
they spread it forward?
Yes.
That's what happens. And that's why
Yes.
sometimes as parents, we have to be mindful. Like you said, we're not perfect, but we definitely have to be careful because, and when I tell you that these children are eyeballing us, I mean, they got us under
Huh.
a microscope. Okay? I feel like this is not
They
fair.
watch everything.
And judge.
Them
You
kids watch everything.
everything.
Whew.
Lord. And it's crazy. So it's like that right there, that's pressure right there. You know what I'm saying? Because you're trying to be the best version of you. And then sometimes people don't get that version of you. So then they paint you as a different person, but not understanding in that circumstance, that's maybe why you behave that way. And we're human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like for example, like I told you, when my grandma passed away, mom, out of all her children, my mother took it the hardest because her and my mother had a bond, an unbreakable bond. So when I see my mother go, I'm like, wow, look at the effect that her mom had on her. She had her mom her whole life. And,
Hmm.
it's going on 2 years and she is struggling. And I'm like,
Hmm.
and then as I'm looking at my mom as a human being, I'm not even looking at her as mom. So everything that I ever thought, I'm like, wow, I throw those away because I'm looking at her as a human being and what she's going through and the hurt
Yes.
that she's experiencing. I think sometimes we need to see that because that check ourselves.
Yes.
That check
Yes.
the ego, that check all that crazy stuff that goes into your head. But when you get to experience that, it just puts you in a whole nother perspective.
Yes. And that is so powerful, what you just said. And because it speaks to redemption, it speaks to understanding, to communication, it speaks to the spirit, connecting to each other on a spiritual level, not just I'm your mother and you're my child, but literally understanding that you are two spirits having communication with one another and helping each other grow. It's not even that we as adults only allow them to grow. They teach us and let us grow as
Yeah.
well. And I want to bring that Fred story full circle. As I mentioned to you, Fred was the only person who at one time I actually said I hated. And it's funny how spirit works with stuff like that, right? So I'm going to bring that story full circle. Just a few months ago, I was buying some stuff, right, for my place where I live, and I was with a friend of mine. She was helping, as guys, we got to have, that female friend to help us pick stuff out. Like I'll pick stuff out. It's like, okay, it's cool, but she's like, no, you might want to get that. So anyway, I see these plants. They're called birds of paradise. They're like these tropical plants that have really big leafy plants, right? And I saw like 20 of them standing there together. And I don't know, the spirit hit me. I was like, I want one. Now, I'm not a plant person. I don't have a green thumb. I don't, have a bunch of plants, although my grandmother did. I grew up around them, right? I just knew I wanted one. And this is what I mean when I say know to whom you belong. So I walk over to them, and this one plant in particular, it was just, I don't know how I believe that you connect to things that are alive.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if they're plant, animal, you can connect to them. And there was this one that literally was like, I'm yours. And so I picked it, right? And I go to the counter, I'm buying my stuff, and I said, I got to name this plant. And then it's like, literally, it's like, no, I'm not going to name it. My friend is. So I turned to my friend and I said, my plant needs a name. And I said, the only thing I know is it's a he. I'm like, I don't know. Don't ask me how I know. I just know it's a he, right? So, and she said, so I told her, I said, listen, I need you to name it. Now, I want you to picture this. She's standing between the plant and I. And so she turns away from me and looks at the plant. Took about 10 seconds just staring at the plant. She then turned back around, looked me dead in my eye, and she said, his name is Fred.
Wow.
Now, mind you, she didn't know the story about Fred. She didn't know anything about Freddie. Of all the names that she could have picked, she said, his name is Fred. And I'm going to tell you, Lady K, my first response, oh, no. Like, no, his name will not be Fred. I am not doing that to myself. I'm not bringing that spirit, that energy in my house. No, that was my response.
Right.
And it's funny when you know to whom you belong, how you will hear from him. And it took about 15 seconds of me going, nope, and being in my own ego. And then all of a sudden, I hear, stop. She named him for a reason. His name is Fred. And I was like, okay, his name is Fred. And I will tell you, Lady K, every morning, every night, because he's a tropical plant, so I got to spray him down, right? I got to water him. I got to take care of him. And now, at my age, I am taking care of Fred. Wow. Fred is no longer with us. The Fred that I grew up with is no longer with us, but now he's with me, and our roles are completely reversed.
Look at that, because
I take care of him. Now I take care of him, and guess what? I feel healed, happy. I feel whole. I look forward to taking care of him every day. I talk to him every day, right? I feel at home when I see him. And what I'm telling everybody out there, those men out there who say, I can't stand my dad, or I wish I wasn't like him, I wish he wasn't in my life. I'm telling you, there is a circular story there, a story of redemption, a story of spirit, of faith, and a story of growth and healing if you're open to it.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I mean, after that, we can't go no further now. I mean,
that's good with me.
We know basic cake.
We good, right? Put icing on it, do some extra seasoning and some stuff on it. Yeah, we good. That cake.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot, and I thank you for opening up and sharing your story, because I'm sure there's some men out there who needed to hear that. They could face their demons, their past, because everybody has that, and that's like you said, we're all human beings.
Yes.
But it's all about you getting to that time and that space to actually deal with your whatever you're running from, or your circumstances, or your past. I think everybody needs to come to that term in their life, and I'm hoping and praying that everybody can tackle that, because life is all about relationships.
Absolutely.
It's about relationships. So it's like you said, you want friendship you want to have. But before we leave, I like how you said, whom do you belong to? Me personally, I know I belong to God. And you said something powerful. You said love, and God is love, and love is God.
Amen.
And that's who I belong to. So y'all out there, y'all gotta ask yourself, Who do you belong to? I hope y'all sweet on that. And if you want to share it in the comment, go ahead and share it in the comment. But
Yes.
absolutely, I recommend everyone, please share this with someone because someone needs to hear this. Someone needs
Yes.
to break some strongholds. Someone needs to know some things about themselves. Some people need to learn how to let go and live. And that's another thing too. Are you living or are you existing?
Ooh. Ooh. Ooh.
Ask
That's
yourself
real.
that.
That is real.
Evaluate. Are you still comparing what happened to you in 1974 or are you in 2023?
That's real.
And that's all I got to say. Any closing remarks from you, Steve?
I just want to say thank you so much, Lady K, for inviting me on your platform, for having this conversation with me. It was very enlightening for me. It's cathartic for me to have these conversations. I continue to heal and grow every time I talk about it. I pray that the people that are listening, they get something from it and it can apply it to their own lives and grow spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, just because they watched.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Steve. And how can the audience reach you? They wanted to reach out to you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm a mindset coach. And so they can reach me at my website. It's steveberlack.com. So it's STEVEBERLACK.com. You can reach me on social media. I'm on Facebook. There's not a lot of Steve Berlacks out there, so you'll find me. I'm on Twitter, S Berlack. I'm on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn. So just look for Steve Berlack, and you'll find me. And I would appreciate you coming by. If you want help with your mindset, come holler at your boy. I can help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. It was a pleasure having you. Everyone continue to follow us here at the Lady K Chat Podcast. You can find us here on Instagram and YouTube, and we'll be back on Spotify and Apple really shortly. But I thank you everyone for tuning into here. If this information was valuable, I want you to hit that like button. I also want you to hit that share button, and I also want to hear your comments on what you think. So with that being said, we'll see you next week here again at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on next Tuesday.
Yes.
Have a good night, everybody.